And there we are.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Daniel. How are you doing?
Doing all right.
Awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. So anyway, like I was saying, you're Daniel. I think I heard your last name is Graham. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Daniel Graham, and you are the lead vocalist and bassist for Great Wide Nothing.
That's right.
Awesome. Okay. So I guess by way of getting started here, the first and most obvious question is going to be, Daniel, how long have you been playing bass?
Since I was 13, so 16 years now.
Nice, nice. Um, did you take lessons at any point, or are you pretty much self-taught? How did all that go?
Mostly self-taught. I had one of the little Hal Leonard books
Gotcha.
that I kind of learned some scales from, but mostly I just learned by ear and playing along to records that I was really into, especially Rush. Rush was very instrumental in my education as a bassist.
You may see the Hemispheres album cover in the background there. Yeah, that's my son actually is a bit of a Rush fan, and he's on a vinyl kick. So I borrowed one of his vinyls to set up in the background because based on listening to your music, I figured that Rush is probably an influence. So yeah,
very much. They're very much embedded in my DNA as a songwriter and as a bassist, and also as a vocalist, even though my voice is about 2 octaves lower than Geddy Lee's.
Yeah. Geddy both vocally and musically is hard to touch. I mean,
man's a monster. He really is.
Absolutely, absolutely. So aside from bass, Daniel, do you play any other instruments?
I do. I play guitar. I'm passable on piano. When I was in college and actively taking classes with my professor at the time, I was a little bit more proficient than I am now. A lot of that's just kind of gone out the window, but I get by.
Gotcha. Did you study music in college, or?
I did.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
I actually, that's where I met my wife. We were both vocal majors at University of North Georgia.
Oh,
so
very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. So, tell me about your current gear and setup. I guess what you would use to play live, that kind of thing.
Gotcha.
Give me a rundown on that.
Well, I would show it to you as well, but it's currently all sitting at Dylan's house. Dylan, our keyboard player, he engineers all of our recordings since we're DIY.
Right.
But I I currently run my Rickenbacker 4003 into a Seymour Duncan bass compressor.
Okay.
And then I run that through a drive pedal into an orange Terror bass.
Okay.
And I've just got the little 1x15, not 15, the 1x12 OBC 112 cab.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Which that little rig is tiny and is super lightweight, which saves a lot of trouble on my back.
Right.
But it kicks, man, and I've not played a gig yet where it was insufficient.
I was going to say small but mighty.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, do you have like a favorite piece of gear, something that just really is near and dear to your heart?
The Rickenbacker. I've been through some serious financial ups and downs, over the years, and that's the one bass that I will never part with.
Gotcha.
I've had that since I was 18. I saved up. Part of the expense was covered by, all my family pooling their money together because they knew I wanted a Rick. And they paid like a down payment on it as a graduation gift. Right. The rest I worked off.
Well, having your family, having some skin in the game, probably makes it even more special.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And I've written every Great White album so far has been written and recorded and performed with that bass. So
Nice.
yeah.
Nice. That's really cool. Do you have any real preference yourself between 4 and 5 string, or even greater number of string basses? Or
I'm very much a 4-string guy. I mean, no disrespect whatsoever to folks who are a little bit more adventurous, but
mm,
the extra string confuses me, to be honest.
yeah, yeah,
My fingers don't know what to do with that extra string most of the time, because everything I learned on a 4,
got you,
and so that's my frame of reference.
got you, got you. Yeah, I'm a converted guitarist.
Hmm.
And I've got I started with a 4 string and eventually got a 5 string, and I like them both for different reasons. I like being able to go a little lower with the five
Yeah.
string, but there is something nice about just a 4 string, because it's I find the 4 string is a little easier to play.
Hmm.
But I mean, I like both. I don't really have a particular favorite myself.
Yeah.
So, musicians tend to collect gear. Do you have anything really unique or unusual in your gear arsenal?
Not really. I mean, I do have, the Terror bass. The Terror bass that I've got, that is actually an older model. So it's one of the 90s, early 2000s, I believe, models of the orange Terror bass. So
Gotcha.
the DI is a little bit more hot. There's a little bit different graphic on the front. Um, you know, that's that's pretty much the extent of it. I don't have a very extensive gear collection, but I'm very proud of that particular little piece of gear, because
Oh, no doubt.
it's a lovely amp.
So, we already touched a little bit on this, but aside from Rush, who are some of your other musical influences?
Definitely yes.
Hmm.
Chris Squire.
Oh, yeah.
If we're talking about bass influences particularly, Chris Squire is very much up there. Honestly, I think I've learned and taken more from his phrasing than I have from Geddy Lee, even though I've been a Rush fan longer.
Right,
And
right.
I know more Rush songs, but I think that there's something, and it might just be that shared choral background, since Squire came up in church choirs and whatnot.
Right,
Um,
right.
and I was a choir kid too. I think there's something about the phrasing of his lines and the way that he kind of some of the counter melodies and whatnot, that translates really well to me, and it speaks to me in a lot of ways. Steve Harris from Iron
Oh,
Maiden,
yeah.
which I think you're wearing a Maiden shirt right now.
I
So
am. I
yeah,
am. Yes. Uh,
um,
Eddie's playing bass,
yeah,
actually.
he's a favorite. Chris Wolstenholme from Muse is a big influence, not so much in terms of like what I've learned of his, but just from listening. There's a lot that he'll do. I tend to point to the song Resistance from the album The Resistance.
Hmm.
There are some runs that he plays that just still stick with me, and I'm still trying to duplicate, and rip off in my own way. I would say Jocko is kind of like that for me as well. I've never really
Hmm.
dug deep and learned a whole lot of Jocko, but there's his way of playing, the expressiveness of it, and uh, some of the ways that he crafted his melodies.
Hmm.
I think they're really, really cool, and they've had a profound impact on me.
Well, doing some research on y'all's music this week, on YouTube, I happened upon a live video of you guys doing a Yes
Yeah,
cover. It was a song I wasn't familiar with, but it was amazing.
well,
I
thank you.
mean, and
Thank
really, a definitely a showcase for you, but also, a nice tribute to Chris Squire. So,
you. Yeah, I think
yeah, very.
that, if I'm not mistaken, the video that you're talking about was probably taken from a Yes tribute set that we did like right when the pandemic hit. So it was our last gig before lockdown, actually.
Gotcha.
From the Caledonian Lounge in Athens, which is no longer an operating venue, but
that's
you know,
a shame.
yeah. But I think that during that set we did Yours Is No Disgrace. We did Roundabout, of course, you know, which is
you have to do Roundabout.
You have to do Roundabout. I mean. You know, we threw the folks who were less familiar with Yes in the room because it was a multi-tribute,
right?
A night kind of thing. You know, we threw the commoners a bone and played Owner of a Lonely Heart because you have to.
Yeah.
And then I think we closed with Heart of the Sunrise, if I'm not mistaken. So it was probably one of those four.
So, going, I guess, sort of into the Wayback Machine, what was the very first concert you attended?
So if we're talking about the first concert that I ever happened to be in the audience for, it was probably Casting Crowns when I was like 6 or 7. I ended up at a church conference with my dad. The first concert I, you know, actually expressed the desire, hey, I want to go see this.
Yeah.
Would have been Rush in 2008. Snakes and Arrows tour. My dad and I went and saw them at Ameris Amphitheater, which back then was Verizon Amphitheater, in Alpharetta, which is, you know, close to Atlanta.
Right. You know, Rush, unfortunately, I never got to see Rush live. I had an opportunity to go, you know, here in Atlanta at one of the last tours, and something came up and I couldn't do it. And, you know, knowing what I know now, I wish I had made more of an effort to see it, you know?
Yeah, so I caught every tour from 2008 until the end.
Wow.
And I missed the Atlanta date of the R40 tour. And I immediately, you know, you can call it, I guess, some kind of foreknowledge, I guess. I knew this was not something that I needed to miss entirely. And I instantly had, you know, guilt for missing it.
Yeah.
So, pardon me. So I got online and I bought tickets for Greensboro, North Carolina. I bought tickets for that show, which was the next day. And I called my dad because, you know, it was our thing for a while to go see Rush together. And I was like, hey, look, you know, I missed the Atlanta date. I'm not going to miss this one. Do you want to go with me? So we hopped in the car, you know, dropped off my car at a Cracker Barrel close to home. And we made the 6-hour haul to go see them up in Greensboro. And I do not regret it whatsoever.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. So over the course of your musical career, have you had a chance to meet any of your musical heroes?
Not really any of my direct heroes, but I've definitely met, you know, I've met a few people that have been influential for me. And, you know, I've met some people that are separated by like 1 degree.
Gotcha.
One cool gig that we got to do back in 2019 was open for Robert Berry, which if you're not familiar with him, he was, you know, California session guy. He was in Ambrosia as a live band for a while, but his biggest thing was being the third member of a band called Three, which was Keith Emerson's 80s band, Keith Emerson and Carl Palmer.
Right.
Their 80s band that they, after Greg Lake left, they made a new band that was basically ELP 2.0, and they called it Three. So the cool thing about that show was that Robert had assembled like this all-star cast, basically, of musicians. He had a couple different guys, including Jimmy Keegan from Spock's Beard, if you're familiar with them.
I've heard of the band, but I'm not terribly familiar.
Great band, especially the early stuff when Neil Morse was the one doing a lot of the writing. But you know, that's a whole different conversation. Point being, Robert was touring an album called 3.2, which featured the last compositions that Keith Emerson had anything to do with before he unfortunately left us a little bit too soon.
Yeah.
And Robert basically spent that night telling stories about, you know, his relationship with Keith and their history and the way that he had worked with all these various different people. And then he'd play like songs from these different projects. So that was a really cool night. And it was kind of, even though Robert himself is not somebody that I would necessarily consider one of my musical heroes, you know, someone who has had that kind of proximity to someone who's been as influential as Keith Emerson was pretty surreal.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You know, you feel like you're getting something, maybe by osmosis. I mean, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, aside from that, I mean, I'm trying to think of any other encounters that have been really cool. Not a whole lot. I mean, I can definitely tell you about like scene and local bands here in Atlanta that I've gotten to meet and play with, but you know, you might not know them.
Right. Right. So away from music, what are your hobbies and interests?
Well, I've got 3 kids, twins that are 6 years old, and then a daughter who just turned 10 months.
Oh, wow.
So I'm very busy, you know, married with kids, and between that and the cats, it's a very full house. Aside from that, though, I work at Dunkin' as a shift manager, you know, and then I do some warehouse work on the side here and there. I like to read. I like to collect records. You know, I'm very much, I'm obsessive about, you know, things that I start collecting, and records are definitely one of those. I would be in front of my collection actually for this, but my wife is currently upstairs with a sleeping baby on the couch.
Yeah, I get it. So, I absolutely get it. Absolutely.
You know, and that's where the collection is. It's up there in the living room. But I guess the only other thing is I'm very much into philosophy and religion. I am a lay Zen Buddhist, and I voraciously read, you know, stuff from all kinds of religious traditions and spiritual literature, that kind of thing.
Very cool.
Political philosophy as well.
Mm-hmm. So tell me about Great Wide Nothing. You know, how long have you guys been together? How did the band form? What's the story? So
Great Wide initially started as a solo project of mine. I had a previous band that I played with throughout high school and early college that fell apart, and I went through, you know, this kind of steep depression, and started writing music again around 2015, 2016. And, you know, at first it was just me layering things, demoing things out in Bandcamp, not Bandcamp, GarageBand.
Right.
And eventually I decided, okay, I want to get back out there and play live again, and I need somebody to do that. And I want to record a proper album. And like I said, I'm a passable pianist, but I'm far from a proficient one. And I can't drum to save my life. So I called up one of the drummers that I worked with in that old band, Jeff, who is our drummer. You know, I was like, hey, you know, I've got this new project. You're the first person that came to mind. So let's see what we can do. And he and I we jammed a little bit, and we got together with a couple different guitar players, and it never really worked, never went anywhere. You know, and then I was like, okay, I really want to find a good keyboardist, because there are tons of guitar players out there, but a good keyboardist is hard to find.
Right.
And eventually, through some mutual friends, I met Dylan, and we talked over social media and got together for a jam session, and he was exactly the kind of player that I was looking for. And it just so happened that he and Jeff were both students of the Atlanta Institute of Music and Media, which, you know, that kind of mutual connection is kind of cool.
Yeah.
So they already had kind of a similar working knowledge. You know, they had a similar pool of friends, and they knew a lot of the same stuff because they had done some of the performance classes that were, you know, the same curriculum. So already, you know, they kind of gelled together, and I gelled with Jeff really well from our previous knowing each other. And yeah, we started playing together and kind of rearranging the stuff that I'd come up with in 2017. And by 2019, we put out the first album, The View from Olympus. And that's kind of been it ever since, you know.
Well, tell me about the songwriting process within the band. Is there a primary writer, or would you say it's more of a collaborative thing? How does that go?
It's so most of the time, the songwriting comes from me. And that's not me tooting my own horn or anything. It's just that's where a lot of the ideas start. Is I'll come up kind of with the general idea and I'll demo out like a skeleton. I'll plunk around on the keyboards a little bit, record some MIDI drums, things like that, and send it off to the guys. And we'll get in a room together and usually hash that out. Change what needs to be changed. And then eventually we'll learn it, rehearse it, and debut it.
So, I mean, based on what you were saying just a little while ago, I think I know the answer to this next thing, but I was going to ask, is Great Wide Nothing anything approaching a full-time thing? It sounds like it's not.
No, very much not. I would love for that to be the case, but the fact of the matter is, unless you start ahead in the industry, unless you already know somebody or have a bunch of money to throw at marketing campaigns, and there is very much a difficulty for anybody who is working or lower class to enter the industry and make it a full-time gig,
right?
Let alone people with families that are at my stage in life,
right?
Right. That at the end of the day, even if I wanted to get out, and even if it was more feasible to, do it the old fashioned way and just hit the road, be a dog and, pay your dues, I can't leave my kids at home alone for months at
exactly.
time. So we kind of, if it ever got to the point where I could tell my wife, hey, you don't have to work anymore. I'm making, such and such amount of money that will support all of us from my music. That would be amazing, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Right.
So, it's,
you've got your priorities clearly in the right place, and that's commendable.
Okay.
So yeah, absolutely. So what would you say would perhaps be the most interesting experience you've had playing live?
Well, interesting in a good way or bad way?
Either one.
Well, I can definitely think it wasn't in Great Wide Nothing. It was in a previous band that I played in. I was still figuring out how to book myself. Like I said, we're totally DIY.
Right.
We have no booking agent. We have no manager. All that basically falls to me.
Okay.
And I learned a lot of that the hard way. And one experience was I booked this old band I was in at a bowling alley in Athens, and we pull up and this place is an absolute wreck, to be completely honest. And so, we go in and we play our cover sets, and then we break out some original music, and then we're in the middle of like a blues cover of some sort, if I'm not mistaken. And this guy just jumps up on stage and grabs the mic, and he will not stop screaming into it, and nobody's doing anything. And this goes on for, probably a good 5-10 minutes. And eventually we just, the guys and I look at each other, the guys in the old band, and we just said, okay, you know what, let's just do a blues vamp in E. And eventually the guy tired himself out, screaming into that mic. I can say I think in that band, and then also in Great Wide, both bands have played at a place at this bar that will currently remain unnamed here in Atlanta, or not quite in Atlanta proper, but kind of in the suburbs. I got offered some very suspicious drugs there at one point. Witnessed several fights. Pretty basic bar band stuff, though, I think.
Good times.
Yeah. In terms of really good, unique experiences, like I said, the Robert Beery show. We've played a lot of like house shows, little punk things, because That's the funny thing about Great White, is that we are very much a prog band, but we also kind of occupy this niche where we're very heavily involved in a scene that's punk dominant.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, that's part of our crowd, and that's part of, I think it makes for an interesting combination, you know, of sounds, but also for a very, we're always that one weird keyboard band,
yeah.
you know? And that works to our advantage, but also to our detriment. So all that to say, you know, we've definitely done our fair share of house parties at, you know, punk houses where there's graffiti all over the wall and things like that.
Right.
But
so, you know, before going on, do you have any pre-show traditions that you stick by? Like, you know, they talk about how, you know, sometimes athletes before a game will unlace and relace their shoes. Is there anything you do consistently before you go on?
not really. You know, stretching is always a good idea.
Right.
There was a period where I was very zealous about doing qigong before getting on stage, but I've forgotten some of the forms that I had learned at that point, and just haven't done it in a while. But I did find that to be a useful practice, because it ends up kind of limbering up the joints and kind of getting things flowing.
Gotcha.
So maybe I should get back into that.
So how often do you change your strings?
As often as I feel necessary and can afford it.
Gotcha.
You know, as a bassist, you know the pain. It's,
yes, bass strings are not cheap.
Nope, not at all. And it's, you know, the thing is, I can get by on the same set for a long time, but
Right.
It's especially with the way that I like to sound, which is that very aggressive, trebly kind of bass sound. You know, I need to change my strings more often than somebody, you know, playing like in an R&B group would.
Right.
You know, because I need more of that brightness. I need more of that lively kind of sound.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
I'd say, you know, at the latest, you know, once every 6 months. Usually,
Gotcha.
Usually it's a little bit sooner than that. You know, sometimes it's a little bit longer, depends on, you know, where things sit financially, because I don't really want to go and drop $40 on a set of strings. But
right. Oh, I completely get that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Daniel, what is your hometown?
So Great White is an Atlanta band.
Right.
We play primarily in Atlanta, and that's kind of a point where all of us migrate toward. But I personally live in Gainesville, which is about 45 minutes or an hour, depending on traffic, northeast of Atlanta.
But and what would you say is your favorite thing about Gainesville?
The record shop. Moe's Record Shop on the Square in Gainesville. I'm probably, I've spent an unconscionable amount of money at that store. Aside from that, I mean, everything on the square is kind of cool, because you've got lots of different dining options. You've got, you know, all kinds of little unique shops. There's a bookshop that's like got a bunch of vintage stuff, called Next Chapter, which they're cool because they exclusively employ, you know, people with special needs and disabilities and whatnot. That's, you know, part of like their, I'm trying to figure out how to word it. It's, the whole point is to give them work experience and, you know, kind of help be that bridge for folks who have unique struggles to be able to more properly function in society, you know, more independently function.
Well, that is awesome.
Yeah, it's a cool spot. It's a very cool spot.
Yeah, that's.
You know, I also like the schools so far. You know, speaking as a parent, the daycare that we've worked with has been incredible. You know, they had the twins for a couple of years, and now they have the baby. You know, and that's really been great. They've been wonderful with them. The school that the twins go to at the moment is really nice too, and they're very proactive, you know, in talking with parents about things. And we keep a pretty nice open line of communication. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it just kind of comes down to those things.
Okay, well, here is a kind of a different question. If you could give any advice now to your younger self, what would it be?
Give up on being famous. Do what you do because you love it. Like, cut yourself out, save yourself the pain of trying to chase this idea that other people need to recognize you for your art to be valid, or for you to be happy. Because I spent so long thinking, it's the whole idea is making it, right? And that's what we're kind of always taught, is that, you need to make a living doing something for it to be legitimate or worthwhile. But that's not the case, It's the art has meaning whether a ton of people are buying copies of it or not.
Absolutely. And for somebody as comparatively young as you are, you're wise beyond your years. I mean, you seem to be an old soul, and I mean that in the best way possible.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Do you have any suggestions for any other up-and-coming bands to check out or potentially reach out to for another bass player interview? I'm always looking for new subjects.
So there's a couple different bands that share bass players in Atlanta. It's good rhythm section players tend to float around.
Right.
Our drummer Jeff is actually in several different bands, but in terms of some of my favorite local bass players, a guy named Chase Salmons plays in Grudge Step. A guy named John Meekum, he plays in Cascadent. I'm trying to remember some others. Jack from Bummer Hill, or Dawson. I can't remember which one of them plays bass, Jack or Dawson. But Bummer Hill is a fantastic band. They're kind of like emo, power pop sort of stuff.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Yeah, ordinarily I could rattle off this whole list. The funny thing is, we actually have a group chat of bassists in Atlanta. I've made the joke before that that's the most reliable news source in the state, because we all just pass gossip and news around to each other. But yeah, I mean, I can probably go down the list and find a bunch of names that I can send you later in a DM.
Oh, that would be great.
But off the top of my head, I would definitely, hit up Grudge Step, Tiny Banshee, Nolan and Tiny Banshee.
Tiny Banshee.
Yeah, great friend.
I love that band name. That is very cool. Tiny Banshee.
The singer Mar and Nolan, they're old friends, and we go way back. And Jeff is actually the drummer in that band as well. Sarah and the Safe Word is another band that Jeff is in. Maddox, their bass player, lovely human being, absolutely lovely. Probably the biggest Bruins fan you'll ever meet, and a fiend for Dunkin' iced coffee.
So you probably see a lot of him.
Maddox
does he come to your Dunkin'?
No, because I mean, I'm all the way up here in Gainesville. A lot of the Safe Word crew, they're more Marietta, Kennesaw, kind of over where our keyboardist lives and where we record. Which that's been a fun adventure, going back and forth from here to Marietta. It's about an hour and a half.
Right.
But I've been doing a lot of that this week, and probably will for a couple more weeks. But
gotcha. Yeah, we've got some family out in Cartersville, so I know how it is making that kind of a trek. So
yeah.
But so I did one of these Monday night, and I had a guy named James Bardish, who is the bass player for a band out in Texas called Ghost Dance Band.
Okay.
And something I've been doing in these is I've been having each person pose a question for the next person to be interviewed.
Okay.
So I've got James's question here, and he was basically wanting to know what led you to choose bass as your primary instrument.
So it wasn't a choice at first as much as it was, you know, a group of kids in middle school that were like, hey, we're starting a band. We all got guitars for Christmas. You look like a bass player. So get a bass. Let's do a band. And, you know, I told my parents at the time I, you know, wanted to play bass, and they were like, okay, we'll get you this, you know, little $120 Dean starter bass pack. And lo and behold, I fell in love with the instrument, you know?
Yeah.
So it wasn't something that I necessarily chose. It feels more like it chose me, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm a converted guitarist, and the way I've been playing bass for about 4 years now, and the way it came about is my son actually took up guitar and absconded with all my guitar gear. So
that happens.
So he and my wife surprised me with a bass, and so I had never touched a bass, let alone tried to play one.
Mm-hmm.
And I discovered that, you know, within a short period of time, I figured out that all of these years I had been a bass player and I just never knew it. And it's been an interesting journey. You know, I actually took the time to learn some music theory with bass, and it's been interesting how some of that theory has actually translated and has made me a better guitarist as well. I mean, I mostly noodle around on the bass, but I do play around some with the normal guitar as well. And it's interesting what having a greater understanding of how it all works really translates to other instruments.
Yeah, so. Well, and it changes your understanding of, you know, how everything interacts and how everything functions.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, for me, the thing about bass that I've come to appreciate and love and value is that the bass determines the chord. You know, a guitar player can play, you know, whatever convoluted jazz chord they want, but if the bass player is playing the fifth, then damn it, that's the fifth. You know, that's what's going to be emphasized.
Absolutely.
You know, and on top of that, I see the role of bass, especially in my own music, as being the thing that gives fluidity and motion. You know, it's what carries you from one chord to the next, one phrase to the next, one idea to the next.
Right.
And when you have a good bass player who knows how to move around, it makes all the difference in a song.
Right. Well, you know, going back to the subject of Geddy, you know, I mean, my personal take on Geddy is I feel like he was one of the first people to move bass from the background to a lead instrument. And and I just, you know, I really respect his ability to do that, because, you know, you can always clearly hear his bass, you know, in virtually any Rush song.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, in so many cases, the bass is relegated to the background.
Yeah.
And it's just, you know, I've been listening to Rush. I'm 54 and a half, and gosh, you know, since probably 1980. So, yeah, I've been listening to them for quite a while, and I've really, you know, just in the last 20 years, really come to a huge appreciation, you know. But yeah, it's and you know, so going back to the previous question, you know, since this is a series, is there a question that you would like to pose to the next person?
I'm thinking about it.
Well,
because I wanted to be a good one. I wanted to be a good one.
Oh, absolutely. You know, if you can't think of anything tonight, you can feel free to DM me. And, you know, so, I mean, you know, we can.
Whoever you interview next, I think, ask them, you know, what keeps you going musically? what's the thing that drives you at this point to continue?
Yep.
You
What's your why?
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah. What's your why? What's your YYZ?
Yes. There
Or
you go.
YYZ, as
Yeah.
apparently correctly called in Canada.
Yep.
But yeah, what's your why? Why do you still do it?
So, beyond Instagram, do you guys have any other social media presence you'd like to hype?
I mean, Facebook, we're on there basically. We'll post announcements here and there. I've tried to integrate Threads into our social platform, and yeah, it's something. Instagram is fun. I really enjoy Twitter, because there's this really kind of cool niche of DIY musicians, bunch of underground punks and ska musicians and folks who are open to literally any kind of genre. And it's just everybody kind of boosting each other up. I've met some great friends that way. We actually just got off a tour, a little 3-day mini tour, a few months back with a band I met over Twitter. They're called Caregiver, and they're from Nashville, Tennessee. And
nice.
Their front person, Jay, they and I bonded over mutual love of Coheed and Cambria, which is my, Rush is my all-time. Coheed is currently my favorite active band. I will never miss a Coheed tour. I'm a nerd about it. But
Jay Sanchez is a genius.
Oh yeah. But no, Jay and I bonded over Twitter over a mutual love of Coheed, and they sent me Caregiver's music, and I sent them Great Wides, and we just kind of developed a rapport and ended up touring together, and it was one of the coolest things. And since that whole band has become great friends of ours. And we just linked up with a group called With Sales Ahead from New Jersey that are going to be coming through Atlanta, and will be local support for them, right before we play a gig with another band that I knew through social media before knowing them in person, which was Flummox, who's also from Nashville, actually. Which Flummox is incredible. That's another band. I was thinking pretty local earlier, but Flummox, if you get the chance to talk to Allison Dellinger, she is everything you could possibly aspire to be as a bass player, in my opinion. Absolutely monster musician.
Well, cool. Yeah, I will definitely see if I can reach out to them near term. So you mentioned that you guys are currently in the studio. Is there anything you want to share about what you're working on?
Well, there's not a whole lot I can share this early in the process.
Gotcha.
But I can definitely say that it's exciting because we're doing things a bit differently, and it's yielding some really cool results. On the two Hymns for Hungry Spirits albums, basically our process was, Dylan and I hash out the arrangement and create a demo and get Jeff in a room to record the whole album to the demos, track him. That way we get that out of the way, and then Dylan and I just kind of go overdub everything over that. This time we're all in the room together. We're kind of learning the songs together and, rehearsing and performing them together live in the room. And there's a very different energy to that. So
right.
Yeah, there's a lot more of that kind of collective power, I feel like, that's coming into it. And I'm very excited. And I'm very proud of the songs as well. I think these are some of the best and most interesting songs that we've done. So it's gonna be a great record, and I'm very, very excited for it.
Well, I'm excited to hear it. So, do you guys have any upcoming shows you'd like to highlight?
We do. March 14th, we'll be in Augusta, Georgia, at Soul Bar, and we'll be doing 2 full sets. The next day, we're in Athens at Bouvet. We'll be playing with Way Past Cool, which is a really awesome kind of pop punk sort of band, along with Pretty Colors, which is kind of jammy, psychedelic, and The While. Then we'll be playing at my favorite record shop in Gainesville, at Moe's Record Shop in Gainesville, on the 3rd day of that run. And that's going to be with a hardcore band called Death Blender. And
that's the 16th.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I'm actually thinking I may try to come up and see you guys.
That would be great. That would be really great. Yeah, that show's going to be a lot of fun. All of them are going to be a lot of fun. But that's all we have until May, and we haven't announced what's going on in May yet. So, stay tuned.
Absolutely. That's exciting. And Daniel, I appreciate you taking the time away from your family to do this. This has really been a lot of fun, and I feel like I've kind of met a kindred spirit here. So that's always a cool thing.
Keep in touch for sure. Let's do it again.
Absolutely. And for those of you that have been watching this and have been in chat, thank you guys, and we'll be seeing y'all again real soon. And I'll be in touch with you, Daniel, about links to various places this will end up being posted, and we'll talk soon.
Sounds great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too. Good night.